Okay, so I wanted to talk about Deflategate because despite the fact that it's been nearly a decade and it has in many ways been talked to death over the years, I feel like there's been kind of a lack of really just explaining what actually happened, going through the story, beat by beat and explaining what happened. And to be honest, there's a lot of moving parts here. So if I leave something out, it might be just intentionally because I have to get through the story, but feel free to, fill in blanks in the comments section below. But yeah, let's just get into it. What happened during Deflategate? And did Tom Brady actually deflate the ball? Well, let's get into it. So first, the beginning of the story, it kind of all starts with Colts linebacker DeQuell Jackson intercepting a pass in the AFC Championship game. It's Colts Patriots AFC Championship game, and DeQuell Jackson says, hey, I just picked off Tom Brady in a conference championship game. I want to keep that ball. So he hands it to an equipment manager on his sideline simply as a souvenir. And according to him, this is all he has to do with this story. He said he didn't even know that there was a controversy about it until he was going home later that day. And this is an exact quote from him. I wouldn't know how that could even be an advantage or a disadvantage. I definitely wouldn't be able to tell if one ball had less pressure than another. So, despite the fact that sometimes he kind of gets made the face of this whole situation, seems like he was kind of just innocent and wanted a souvenir. So the poor guy, his souvenir becomes one of the biggest scandals in recent history in the NFL. So now we have to talk about PSI, which stands for pounds per square inch. It's essentially just a measurement in how inflated or deflated a football is. The ball must have a gauge pressure between 12.5 and 13.5 psi. That's the range you have to be within. Interestingly, the rule used to be that the home team simply just set the football for both sides, but quarterbacks such as Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, a Colts and a Patriots quarterback, argued that it would be better for the offense if they could set their own footballs. And hey, the NFL is never against making a rule to help out the offense, so they say sure thing. You guys can set, the offense can set the PSI the way that they want as long as it's in the range. So the league does before each game, they check, okay, yes, this is within the range, and then you can go play. They don't continue to check throughout the game. They do not log the times during the game. They simply just check good or not good. However, somewhere along the way, after DeQuell Jackson intercepted that pass, handed it to an equipment manager, somehow that ball got tested, and they said, hey, this feels underinflated, and they went to the refs during halftime of the conference championship game. And here's where things get weird, where there was kind of a lot of weird things happening here. So first, former NFL referee Gary Austin initially said that 11 out of the 12 balls used by the Patriots were measured to be 2 psi below the minimum amount. However, there were reports that contradicted that allegation. Some were stating that only a single ball was lower than 2 psi below the minimum amount. It was later revealed that NFL official Clete Blakeman's measurement sequence, which was considered to be the most accurate one. I don't know why Clete Blakeman is considered the god of measuring footballs, but they consider his to be the most accurate one. And they said that 5 of the 11 footballs were measured to be below 11 psi. Keep in mind, the maximum or the minimum that you can have it is 12.5. So that's 1.5 lower, which is a magnitude of pressure loss they felt would be difficult to account through environmental factors. And is it? Well, again, we're going to get more into this in a second, but just for a bit of a jumping off point, so HedgeSmart Labs found that similar weather changes could cause an average of 1.8 psi to drop in football pressure. So that alone, okay, maybe not, maybe something. Hard to say for sure, just on face value. Worth mentioning, they wanted to see if there was just something going on with the footballs in general, so they measured the Colts balls. They only had so much time because it was halftime, so they only were able to measure 4 of them, and they had 2 different gauges. On the first gauge, everything was fine. On the second gauge, 2 of their balls were underinflated, although it was never specified by how much. Because keep in mind, if it was 12.4, well, then that would kind of make sense, actually, right? Some would go down. But if it was under 11, then that would maybe be, maybe would say that the weather itself is changing a lot of things. So it's hard to really jump to conclusions with just that. But anyway, the refs said, okay, well, this is weird. I don't know what's going on. But they reinflated the footballs. They put more air into it. And then, it met the specifications. And then they were reintroduced into the game. In the second half, the Patriots outscored the Colts 28-0. So seems unlikely that had anything to do with the game. The Patriots dominated that football game. And honestly, I think if this was a different team, this is probably where the story dies. But you have to remember just how hated the Patriots were in this era. There's been kind of some revisionist history of like, oh yeah, the Chiefs are, the Patriots were bad, but the Chiefs are on another level. People hated the Patriots, and they were willing to jump on any cheating scandal that could come up. So this became a massive story, and it started to get a little bit weird once again when the Colts GM, Ryan Gergson at the time, said he notified the league about concerns of underinflated footballs before the game. He said that he notified them before the game because back in week 11, the Patriots played the Colts. Mike Adams had 2 interceptions, and they kind of noticed something was off then, and so they decided to notify the league prior to the conference championship game. That is not what Dean Blandino said, who was the head of officiating at the time. He said that they didn't know about it until halftime. So this is where the NFL versus the Patriots thing starts to emerge. One of the real criticisms Patriots fans had at the beginning of this scandal was that the person that was tasked with investigating this matter was attorney Ted Wells, who did a great job with the Jonathan Martin, Richie Incognito scandal. But the reason why Patriots fans were upset is because he worked for the NFL previously. So now it feels like you're hiring someone that is kind of pro-NFL in a scandal where maybe the NFL is partially to blame for this whole thing happening, right? If they were supposed to know about it ahead of time, but now they're saying they didn't, feels like a conflict of interest. But Wells files his report. It's a 243-page report, and it alleged in it that it was more probable than not that the Patriots equipment manager had deliberately circumvented the rules. It was also determined that Brady was, quote, generally aware, end quote, of the deflation. So even in the report, nothing set in stone, but some of the evidence for why they felt like they were leaning in this direction was because, for one thing, there were a couple locker room workers who they joked about the inflation and deflation of the ball. They joked about needles and gifts from Tom Brady to them. So they had talked about essentially Brady wanting them to deflate the football, although it was never especially said that Brady wanted them to deflate it below the legal amount. One thing that's worth mentioning is that reportedly Tom Brady and the Patriots like to have the ball at the lowest point of what the legal amount was. So 12.5 is the legal amount. That's what they liked it to be. So it's not fair to say from that alone that Brady wanted it to be illegal deflation. Some deflation is legal. But now, at this point in this video, we're going to have to get a little sciencey here. So apologies to anyone who, if you're, if you're one of my younger watchers who just got out of science class, I apologize. But we'll go through it, and we'll try not to get too bogged down into details. But essentially, the Wells report relied on scientific analysis performed by the Exponent Consulting Company and also supported by Dr. Danielle Morrow, a Princeton University physics professor. And the way a football can be deflated is actually a little bit complex because it's not like you just inflate it one area and then slowly over time it's going to start to get smaller. In fact, there's a lot of factors that can cause the PSI to be higher or smaller. Weather is a big one of those. The hotter it is, the higher the PSI is going to be. The lower it is, the lower the PSI is going to be. It's a cold game, so they're doing this inside, right? They're going to inflate it inside and they're going to test it inside. So when they test it inside, if it's a 12.5 ball, then when you go outside, that ball is now going to be lower than 12.5. However, here's where things just get really complex and weird. So not only that, but when they went to remeasure at halftime, they didn't remeasure outside. They went back inside to measure them, meaning that the ball was going to start to warm up again. So you have to figure out exactly how long were they inside and how much did the ball warm up. So you have to calculate that into the equation as well. And then there's other factors, such as the wetness or dryness of a ball's surface has an effect on the PSI. One of the gauges was just calculated to be like, a little over a third off, a little over a third of 1 PSI off. So all of that, factoring in, there are many things that could go wrong. However, what the Wells report determined with the information that they had was using kind of all this math to figure this out. They decided that while some loss in PSI was expected, they felt it had exceeded the normal amount. So the argument essentially is that, if 12.5 is the legal limit, they can kind of say, okay, yes, maybe 11 would be understandable, but not 10.5. Those aren't the official numbers, but that's just an example. So that's what they ultimately concluded, which is why they said it was more likely than not that the ball was deflated by the Patriots. But here's where I think things get really weird with all of this, is because they didn't calculate the bag. Yes, the bag of the ball has a big impact in all this. So why does the bag matter? Well, again, they keep the ball outside. The balls are now, they're accumulated to the temperature of whatever it's going to be outside. Very cold game. Then they grab the bag of footballs, bring it back inside to measure them. So what did Wells do? He said, okay, we have to calculate that. That's going to have to be a factor in the discussion. The ball should get a little bit warmer because it's been inside for a little bit, which is true. That is a correct thing he should do there. However, if the ball is in a bag with other cold balls, it's not going to warm up as quickly, and that part was not calculated into the discussion. So it seems likely that the ball should have actually, that should have changed the math on it a little bit. Now, if this is the case, this doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't deflate the football, but just that now the ball would in fact be in that range of, yes, this is possible that this could have just happened because of happenstance. And some people who are smarter than me say that this is actually what should have happened, and this is around the correct number, which makes sense. So really interesting things going on here. Ultimately, certainly with the evidence we have, there's no way you could go with any suspension or any punishment with this stuff, right? Well, of course, that's not the case. So here came the punishments from the NFL after this. So first, the two people who I talked about who were texting about Tom Brady wanting the balls to be deflated, they were suspended indefinitely. I was never able to figure out if they actually got their jobs back or what happened there. If someone knows that, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, so that was the first punishment. The second was Tom Brady himself was suspended for 4 games. And finally, the Patriots were fined $1 million, which feels like weirdly low for a NFL team, right? That's like very much a slap on the wrist in terms of how much money they make. That's like, their lowest paid guy in the roster makes that much. But they were also docked a fourth round pick and a first round pick for the Deflategate scandal, which was definitely a harsh punishment. Also, the NFL was just kind of like smug about this. Like, I don't know a better way to phrase it, but I was going to read it out, but it's just too long. But Troy Vincent sent a letter that kind of just felt like a father scolding his 5-year-old to Tom Brady about this whole thing, which was kind of weird. So Robert Kraft of the Patriots didn't appeal. He paid the fine. He said, okay, we're out the draft picks. It is what it is. But Brady did appeal. He didn't want to be suspended 4 games without pay, worth mentioning as well. So here's where, again, now it's really Brady versus Roger Goodell, because the NFLPA requested a neutral arbiter to look at this situation. The NFL declined and went with Roger Goodell instead. And at this point, we kind of have to get into the Tom Brady destroying his phone thing. So that was a part of this. So during this whole scandal, the NFL went to Tom Brady and said, I believe it was during the Wells report, and said, we are going to want your cell phone, and we're going to want to look through everything you sent through the past 4 months. Tom Brady, he claims that he never got that and he never knew he wasn't supposed to do this, but he destroyed his cell phone and didn't cooperate with the investigation, destroying all the texts that were there. And this is kind of one of those things where I kind of do understand, even if he didn't cheat, why you would not want if you're a famous celebrity, why you wouldn't want a company to look through every text message you sent in the past 4 months, which was reportedly over 10,000 text messages. And it's also worth mentioning the Tom Brady's team, not the Patriots, but the people that work for him in particular, did offer a way for the NFL to get the text that they wanted by going to the people he sent messages to, and they made a list of everyone that he has sent at least one text message to, so that way they could potentially reach out. So the logic here was, hey, you can go check out the messages that Brady has sent Belichick, but you can't look at the messages Brady has sent his wife. Right? Which does make sense to me, but also the NFL considered that to be an impractical solution because of how many people were on that list. So I don't know. They could have pursued it further. They chose not to. It's a weird situation, but this definitely was the kind of nail in Brady's coffin, I would say. I think this hurt him even more than the Deflategate thing did. Also, during this Brady versus Goodell thing, there was kind of some more conflict of interest stuff. So, like Lauren Reisner, who worked on the Wells report, also served as the attorney who cross-examined Brady at the appeal hearing on the behalf of the NFL. So that's kind of like weird, right? Ultimately, whether you think that Brady did or didn't do this, definitely doesn't feel like the NFL is really trying to get a neutral stance on this at this point. And ultimately, the NFL filed papers in Manhattan federal court seeking to confirm Goodell's decision to suspend Tom Brady. The next day, the NFLPA announced that they had filed something that would prevent the NFL from suspending Tom Brady for 4 games. So, okay, those are kind of the two things happening right now. The U.S. District Court overturned the suspension. They said there was a lack of fair process for Tom Brady. They overturned this suspension. Okay, Brady not suspended. They still do lose the draft picks and they got fined for $1 million, but ultimately, at least you keep your superstar quarterback for the whole season. However, 6 months later, the U.S. Court of Appeals reinstated the suspension because they said not that they felt Brady was guilty, but that there was enough evidence to meet the minimum legal standards to allow a suspension. So essentially, they said there is enough evidence here that this company can suspend you if they want to, because some people have misreported this part of the story and said that, well, hey, the NFL is a private company, they can suspend anyone for any reason. That's not exactly true. The NFL players have a union, right? Like, you can't just do whatever you want here. But essentially, this said that there was enough evidence to just allow the suspension, and so because of that, the suspension was upheld. Since Brady appealed it during the 2015 season into 2016 season, so it actually was over a decade ago that this thing started. Now that I think about it, because it was the 2014 season that this happened, but the 2016 season was his suspension. Got suspended in 2016, and ultimately, it might have cost him an MVP award, if you think about it. Brady still finished second in MVP voting that year, behind Matt Ryan, who did have a higher passer rating than Brady that year. So I think Ryan probably still gets it, unless Brady was awesome those first 4 weeks, which he might have been. But ultimately, Brady did not win the MVP. Ryan won the MVP, but Brady beat Matt Ryan in the Super Bowl anyway, which I'm sure he will take that season, despite all the chaos that surrounded it. And ultimately, that is the main thing we know about the Deflategate suspension, right? What are my personal thoughts on this? I think it's kind of undeniable the NFL was really weird about this whole situation. Like, for me personally, okay, maybe, like, I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning, but it does seem like there is a bit of an advantage to having an underinflated football. That's why Brady wanted it at the lowest legal limit at best, right? Was because there is a slight advantage. But it's definitely like having pine tar on a baseball bat, something that there is a limit you're allowed to have, but this is not a steroids cheating scandal by any means, and it's weird it was kind of treated as such. Feels like if this is a real issue, you could have simply just created rules to, remeasure, during each quarter, remeasure during a halftime, things of that nature, instead of really coming down so hard on Tom Brady. Ultimately, it just doesn't feel like there's enough evidence to say Brady cheated in this situation. It just doesn't. So I think it's really kind of weird that it became such a huge story when, again, I started this video and I'll finish this video with saying that the player who intercepted the pass reportedly didn't even know about it, and also said that he didn't consider it to be an advantage or disadvantage. And so if that's the case, then why is it such a big deal? Of course, I don't think I would sit here and say that Brady definitely didn't deflate the ball. And to be honest, it feels like it'd be pretty simple to do so. You just get a needle and stick it through the ball after, apparently they're measuring it before they even get out to the field. So maybe just an equipment manager on the field can do that real quick. Apparently there was this was a report, but apparently there was someone who took the balls into the bathroom for a bit. So seems like you could have just done it there. Like, that would be pretty easy. It would have been easy to do. I don't think it's impossible, but if it was, it doesn't seem like it was by a ton, and there just doesn't seem to be strong enough evidence to support that it definitely was. So I don't know. It's just a weird situation, but yeah, I think that this was a thing we should have talked about, and a thing we should have said, hey, let's make sure that we have regulations in place so teams can't take advantage of this thing. But also, like, do I think that this was an illegal act that was, made? And do I think this was a massive cheating scandal? No, I don't personally. But that's just how I see it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.